Hi everyone, I'm sitting here with the man himself, Ed Chan. I am so excited for this session today. Been planning it for a couple of weeks now, and I'm very excited to get started. We asked some questions to our mentors to have this conversation today with Ed to see what are the topics that our firm owners are experiencing or asking about or concerned about. What are the topics that are relevant for our listeners and audience? And we wanted to ask Ed and see what wisdom he's going to share with us. How are you feeling, Ed?
Yes, I'm good. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm all ready and looking forward to it.
Awesome. So let's get started. Ed, most of our firm owners are encountering many challenges,
Mhm.
and some of these firm owners asked about senior client managers, why they matter. The first question that one of our listeners brought up was, what's broken about how most firms use client managers, and why is the Wise Way different?
Yes, great question, Claudia. Yes, well, it matters because when you're building a business, you need different skills. And I call them grinding, minding, and finding. And yes, you do need to get the work done, so you need people to do the work, and but you also need a minder, a manager to manage the work, and also you need a finder. And most firms run what I call flat teams, and they hire somebody to do everything, and that's not very cost effective, and it's also not very conducive to the often to the personality of the individual that's been put in that role. So often I get accountants say to me, "Oh, my staff just won't pick up the phone and talk to the client because the most effective way of dealing with the client is to speak to them, not to send them an email." And it's because you're expecting a grinder, someone that likes to do the work and not a people person, to pick up the phone and talk to someone when they're not a people person. So you're forcing them to go against what their nature is, and it's a little bit like playing sports, Claudia. Like everybody knows football or soccer, and there's different positions in on the soccer team, and you've got to pick people that suits those positions. So if you're a really fast person, you want to put that person on the wing, and if you're someone that's got really good reflexes, you want to put that person in the goal position and as a goalie, and so forth. So some people have an instinct to join, to set the forwards up to score goals. So everybody has a position, and in account or in business, it's exactly the same. So you want to put someone in the position where they enjoy talking to people and they enjoy people because they're the ones that'll pick the phone up and talk to the person. But if you ask someone that likes to do the production and not like to talk to people, and you ask them to talk to clients, so they tend not to do that. And they also and also, when there's a problem, it's always best to pick the phone up and talk. And grinders don't like to do that. They'll send another email. If you send an email, if there's a complaint by a client and you send an email, that's the worst thing to do. You need to pick the phone up, and the grinders won't do that. They'll send an email, and that tends to escalate the problem, not water the problem down. So you've got to put people in the right seat, in the right bus. And it's in the most important position is the client manager role, because that's the role for communication. And generally, as you're growing your firm, the owners themselves take that role, and
Hmm.
often, the owner themselves are all three: grinding, mining, and finding. But that's a that's a problem if you want to grow the firm, because you can't do everything, and it's much easier to find grinders than it is to find minders or finders. So most people that go to university and choose accounting, they're more they're more introverted and more of a grinding personality. And I'd say 80% of them are, and then 20% of them are more they like people, and they can do both. But when you're trying to grow the firm, the hard people to find are the people that enjoy talking to others. But there's a lot of people who just like to sit there and do the work. So we developed this deep and narrow team structure as opposed to a flat structure, so that people can play from a position of strength. So they can be who they are and be themselves, and then it's natural. And if you're in your flow, then you enjoy. You're really happy, and if you're really happy, you're a lot more productive. And it just is it's just a really good dynamic if you put people in the right seat in the right bus, and then you watch the whole team work together in a dynamic way, and everybody's complementing each other. The big mistake that owners make is when they think they've got to hire someone just like themselves. But
Mm.
you really need to hire someone that complements you. And you've got to understand that the service that you offer to the client is made up of grinding, is made up of minding, and it's also made up of finding. And you need to find people in those particular roles. So that's a long-winded answer to your question, but I think it absolutely matters. And of course, the way to progress your firm is then, as you grow your firm, you find people to join the team. But the easiest one to find is the grinding. So someone that enjoys just sitting there doing the work. And then, of course, as you grow the firm, then you've got to we set up teams, and then you just add another team on and another team on. But invariably, the hardest role to find is the client manager, because that person needs to be very experienced and also needs to enjoy talking to people.
Yeah, totally. And something that you said was very relevant, and I think it's key to this conversation because you just said that some owners embody the role of the senior client manager at the beginning, and then when they are hiring for one, they want to find someone like them.
Mhm.
And many have this friction with their clients when they're doing this transition, because clients want to stay with them, with the
Yes.
owner, and they want to manage things with the owner. But as we know, that could quickly turn into a bottleneck. So
Yeah.
how do you used to handle, and Shannon Naylor, these conversations with clients, or how did you manage the client saying no, but I want to speak directly to Ed, or I want to work directly with Ed? How did you handle that situation usually?
Yes, well, that's a great question, because that's part of the problem of scaling your
Mm,
business. And people don't like change. Clients don't like change. Doesn't matter who they are. People generally don't like change. And if you introduce somebody else to them, of course they're gonna push back. But I found that people are either early adopters, middle adopters, or late adopters. So what does that mean? What it means is that, the early adopters, they don't mind change. They're changing all the time. They're chasing the next shiny thing, or the next thing that interests them, and they're changing very quickly. But the middle adopters, I'm a middle adopter. I don't like change, but I do change, but it takes me a little bit more to change. So I need to create a new habit, and by creating the new habit, I've got to do the new thing a few times before it becomes a new habit. And then there's the late adopters who, you know, take a long time to change. And, they have to do the new thing 20 or 30 times before it becomes a new habit. So if you appreciate the client that you're dealing with, some clients you can, of course, it starts with when they come in, they've only met you. They don't know anybody else in the firm,
yeah.
right? So of course they're going to come back to you. If you don't introduce somebody else to them, you're not going to have a chance of even transitioning. But so because they don't know anybody else, they just know you. So when they say I only want to deal with you, they're not really saying I only want to deal with you. It's just what they're really saying is, A, you haven't introduced anybody else to me. I don't know anybody else in your firm.
Mm,
And B, when you do introduce someone else to them, they might be middle adopters or they might be late adopters, which means that you've got to take, for middle adopters, you got to be in that meeting 4 or 5 or 6 times until they're comfortable with the new person, and then they transition over to the new person. And then with late adopters, you've got to be in that meeting 20 times before they're
Yeah.
comfortable with the new person. So it's not about you or just wanting to deal with you. It's about being comfortable with the new person that they're dealing with and getting to know them. That's the secret. And if you hire the right people, so if you hire a people person for the client manager role, then because they're a people person, people like them generally, so the transition is much easier. But if you put a grinder in that role, it's going to be much harder to transition that person. The client may not resonate with him or
Yeah.
her, but generally the owners are a combination of all three. But I find with the owners, when they start their business, they've got to be like a finder kind of person. A person who's a finder is a people person, right?
Yeah.
So generally, people that start their own businesses are a people person, and they can attract a lot of new clients. And so you got to find someone. It doesn't have to be a people person in that client manager role, but that person has to like people, not shy away from people, and they've got to be fairly knowledgeable, because knowledge even if someone doesn't click with you, your
Mm.
knowledge can overcome, some differences in personalities and so forth. So and spontaneous and service. If you don't know something, you can, make sure you go away, find out, but you got to make sure you come back to that client and then, provide the answer. And the worst thing to do is to say, I'll get back to you on that, and you don't. And then that
Mm.
loses trust. So they're the ingredients. So when someone says, I only want to deal with you, that's not what they're really saying. So you've got to understand the dynamics. Otherwise, you'll recoil into, all my clients only want to deal with me. And then you'll burn yourself out, and you won't be able to scale your business because of this misunderstanding that you think that everybody wants to deal with you. Because I'm an example of that. I started my practice and my business, everybody was just seeing me, and I've transitioned it right across. No, I don't see anybody anymore, and my largest client's still there, and they're quite happy with the new person they're dealing with, and so it works. But you just got to get the technique right, and it starts with your mindset. Don't think that when someone says they only want to deal with you, that's what they're really saying. They're just saying to you that, I don't know the person. I want to get to know the person. I want to be able to trust that person. And that takes time. And it takes more time with some than others.
Awesome. So, from that, and I find it very interesting because that's one thing that happens when you are hiring a client manager. You said that a rule of thumb should be that this person is a people's person. But
Mm.
and that's the best case scenario, right? You hire a client manager and this person goes very well. Your early, middle, and late adopters get on very well with this senior client. But then there's the B side of this thing, and it could go really wrong. So, what do you think, or what have you seen one mistake firm owners make when they're defining the role or hiring this person that makes a senior client manager or a client manager fail at their position? What's one thing you've seen that makes them really not stay for long?
Well, a common thing is that um, they think this person needs to be just as experienced as they are
Mm.
themselves. And they often say to me, "Oh, that person's not ready yet. She's not he or she's not ready for the client manager role." Um, that's a misconception, because if we go back to the 80-20 rule, 80%, as long as they can handle 80% of the questions that are coming through, then you're still there for the last 20%. All right. So the culture should be that they should be able to handle 80%. So that gives the clients some confidence. But on 20% of the times, because tax is very complicated, nobody, not even the partners themselves know everything. But in the odd times that they don't know, or in the 20% that they don't know the answer, it's what I said earlier. It's really important they go away, they go to the partner and they ask that question of the partner, or the partner gets involved with the last 20%. So, the partner might get called into the meeting for those questions that they don't know the answer to. So from a partner's perspective, that's the way that you can scale your business, because if you only get dragged in for the last 20%, then your capacity increases hugely, right? But if you get caught in for 100%, of the relationship with the client, then your capacity is gone. And 80% of the time, you don't need to be there, because if you train your client manager well enough, then they should be able to handle it 80%. The mistake that people make is they think that they've got to handle 100% before they
Mm,
can get promoted to a client manager role. That's not the case. Now, if someone can only handle 60%, that then you have to get involved for 40%. In other words, you get involved for a lot more. And then over time, you'll find that you'll only get involved with 30%, then 20%, then 10%. Then eventually it's just every now and then. It could be just once a year they might bring you in, or it could be once every 5 years they bring you in. But that's the mistake that people make, thinking that they've got to hire somebody that's got the same experience as they are. But the main ingredient that you need to find someone, it's yes, they've got different levels of experience, but they've got to generally like people. They've got to be happy to pick the phone up and talk to someone, as opposed to being more comfortable sending an email to the client. And I think that's the main ingredient. And of course, you've got to have some level of experience, because you want this person to take at least some workload off of you, so you're not called into every meeting. But the more junior they are, the more you'll get called into the meeting. But as long as they're trained to understand that it's okay not to know the answer, but it's not okay to make up the answer. It's very important that they acknowledge that that they don't know the answer, or things might have changed, but tax changes constantly. And the most important thing is they go away, they talk to you, they find the answer, they must go back to the
yeah.
client for that last 20%. And then that builds trust. And that's where the problem is. So if we address the problem and not the symptom, the problem
Mm,
is not that, they don't want somebody else to do their work for them, or they just want to talk to you. That's not the problem. That's the symptom. The problem is that the person that you've given either isn't experienced enough, or is not
mm,
giving them good service, is not coming back to them, is not communicating, and they don't know them. All right. So that's the problem. So you've got to address those issues. You've got to address the problems, not the symptoms. And it's a slow process. So you've got to start with the right person first, which is someone that enjoys talking to people. And then you train them and you improve the other side. And eventually, it can be done. And of course, lots of partners still get involved, every now and then on the really important things, and they only get pulled into a meeting for those things. But the client manager has to understand that, they won't know everything, and it's okay not to know
mm.
everything, but need to come to me if you don't know something, and don't make up the answers, or bring me into the meeting, but only for the last 20%. Don't bring me into a meeting for everything, because what happens is that you get called into a meeting and they just sit back and watch you work, and that's not the reason for you hiring that person. You're not going to pay them a wage and do their job for them. So the idea is for you to train them to do your work, but you need to do it slowly, not in a big rush, and that takes time.
Yep, takes time, and I actually wanted to make one last short question, and it's about the levels of the client manager. Can you have an assistant client manager? Can you train them into a senior client manager?
Yes. And the difference between them is experience. And so the common ingredient between them is that they've got to like people and be happy to talk to people. That's the common ingredient. The difference is just the level of experience. So senior client manager can handle, most questions, and the assistant client manager is really a trainee that's being trained to step into the senior client manager's role. So the way that it should work is that as that team gets busier and busier and there's more and more clients coming through, then you've got to start training an assistant client manager to handle the C and D class clients and all to answer the common questions and then that leaves you with handling the A and B class clients. And eventually, that assistant client manager, the portfolio gets so large that they can carve off, a portion of those fees, and they start off in their own team. And then they hire their own grinders to do the work, and then they eventually, become independent of the original team, and they run their own team, and they continue growing the fee base in that team. So that's your growth model moving forward.
Amazing. Amazing. Thank you so much, Ed. We're running out of time for our questions, but I think everyone got a better picture of what a senior client manager or client managers can do in your practice, why they matter, and how you can scale with the right person on the right seat. So we're going to be answering questions probably in our next edition. So thank you so much for your time and bye bye. Stay tuned.
Right. See you next time.